Have you ever noticed how financial progress feels dramatic at first, almost unmistakable, and then, without much warning, settles into something much quieter? In the beginning, the wins tend to be obvious and emotionally charged. You pay off a credit card charging 22 or 25% interest, and almost overnight, hundreds of dollars stop draining out of your life each month. Your cash flow improves immediately. Your stress drops just as quickly. And the relief feels tangible because something that was actively working against you has finally been removed. Nothing scaled, nothing compounded, and nothing grew in a meaningful way, but the impact feels enormous because the change is instant and unmistakable. At some point, though, that feeling fades. You're still saving, still investing, and still making careful choices, but the numbers stop moving in ways you can easily feel. Your balances inch forward instead of jumping. There are no dramatic milestones to celebrate, and the excitement that once came with every improvement starts to disappear. If you find yourself in that position now, doing the right things but wondering why progress feels slower than you expected, you are far from alone. What most people fail to recognize is that this quiet is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It's often the moment when progress changes form rather than speed. Before we go any further, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. What's actually happening beneath the surface is simpler than it feels, but also more unsettling than most people anticipate. By the time progress begins to feel quiet, you've usually already conquered the easy wins. The high-interest debt has been eliminated, the emergency fund has been built, and your bills have become more predictable. You might have even fully funded your retirement accounts. The moves that once produced immediate relief no longer exist because you already made them, and that entire category of progress has effectively run out. In its place, a different kind of progress takes over, one that takes longer to reveal itself. Early financial progress is largely about removing friction, and friction removal is loud because it delivers instant relief. Later progress, by contrast, is about building momentum, and momentum is quiet in its early stages because it depends on being consistent rather than making some bold changes. Monthly contributions, steady investing, incremental raises, and small improvements in efficiency do not create sudden jumps on their own, even though they're far more powerful over the long run. Adding a few $1,000s to an investment account feels like nothing in your daily life compared to wiping out a 25% interest payment, because one gives you instant relief while the other takes time to show anything at all and can even move backward at first. This shift messes with people because it feels backwards. You expect progress to feel faster once you get better at managing money, not slower. So when the excitement fades and the feedback disappears, it's easy to assume something's wrong. The calm starts to feel uncomfortable. Stability feels like you're stuck. And without clear signs that things are still working, doubt creeps in. Not because progress has stopped, but because there's nothing reassuring you in real time. As time goes on, your sentiment changes, but not because the market changes, because your experience does. At this point, if the market is down for a few months or even a year, it can feel alarming, simply because you've never lived through that before. You're putting money in consistently, but you haven't seen any real payoff yet, so the effort starts to feel wasted. There are no tangible rewards to point to, just statements that look flat or slightly down. You start asking yourself, why am I even doing this? Your finances settle down and the novelty wears off. You stop patting yourself on the back for things like budgeting or saving because at this point, that's just the baseline you expect from yourself. A few years ago, those same habits would have felt like a huge win. Now they're routine. The wins that once felt exciting barely register anymore. This is where the real danger emerges, not because growth has stalled, but because interpretation changes. Human psychology is wired for fast feedback, and for most of history, effort and reward were tightly linked. Wealth building breaks that pattern by demanding consistent effort while delaying visible rewards. And the better your system becomes, the less feedback it provides along the way. When the fireworks stop, the mind naturally starts asking whether the system is still working, whether progress should feel faster by now, and whether others are somehow pulling ahead. This flat phase shows up after you've already done the obvious work. It shows up as long stretches where you're doing all the right things, but nothing looks very different when you check your accounts, followed by moments where the results suddenly feel much bigger than the effort you're putting in. The frustrating part is that the quiet stretch almost always comes first. There's no signal telling you it's about to work. You only recognize it later, looking back, once enough small gains have stacked up to change how fast things move. You can clearly see this with investing. Early on, the math makes sense, but it doesn't feel rewarding. You might have $10,000 or $15,000 invested, and after a full year, it's grown by a few $100s. You notice it because it's new, but it doesn't feel meaningful. Then you keep contributing. Your balance creeps up to $50,000 or $100,000. At that point, the account might grow by $5,000 or $10,000 in a year, but it still barely registers. You check the number, see that it's higher, and move on. Until growth becomes consistent and noticeable, that middle stretch feels flat, even though the gains are real. This is where people get tripped up. When the excitement fades, stability starts to feel like being stuck. Consistency feels like nothing is happening, and without obvious wins, it's easy to assume momentum is gone. And that's when people start second-guessing themselves. They don't always jump into some risky new investment or overhaul their entire plan. More often, they do something quieter and more familiar. They stop feeling rewarded by their progress, so they look for a reward they can actually experience. A nicer car, a bigger house, a renovation, new furniture, a lifestyle upgrade that makes the money feel real again. After months or years of doing a responsible, boring thing, spending becomes a way to prove to yourself that the effort was worth it. You can see it, you can touch it, other people notice it. And for a moment, it replaces the excitement that saving and investing no longer provide. The problem isn't that they failed to make progress, it's that they traded long-term momentum for a short-term feeling of payoff, restarting the cycle without even realizing it. This pattern shows up everywhere. With fitness, the first changes come quickly, then slow down, even though the work still matters. With learning a skill, early improvement is obvious, while later progress is harder to see. New Year's resolutions work the same way. The first few days feel great, the motivation is high, and the progress feels real. Then it gets quieter, the changes are harder to notice, and most people quit within weeks. Money follows the same pattern. What makes this phase uncomfortable is that there's nothing obvious to fix. Your bills are paid, your debt is under control, you're not making any bad choices. You're just waiting, and waiting without feedback is hard. If your expenses no longer cause sleep loss, your savings or investments are growing steadily, and financial surprises don't feel like emergencies anymore, you're not stuck. You're stabilized. And while stabilization doesn't feel impressive, it's the base that allows bigger progress later. Growth doesn't stack on chaos. It stacks on systems that are boring enough to run without constant attention. This is also why checking your accounts too often makes things worse. When you look every day or week, all you see are tiny changes that don't mean much on their own. The signal you're looking for shows up over longer stretches of time. What helps during this flat phase is shifting the question you're asking. Instead of wondering whether things look good right now, it's more useful to ask whether your finances are actually headed in the right direction. Have things improved over the past 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, and so on? When you zoom out and look at the trajectory instead of the noise, progress becomes easier to see, even when it doesn't feel great in the moment. The people who do best financially aren't the ones who constantly tweak things out of impatience. They're the ones who leave good systems alone once they're in place. They understand that just because things are quiet doesn't mean nothing's happening. A lot of the time, it's simply progress building in the background, and the lack of friction is exactly why it feels less dramatic. So if you're here right now, steady, disciplined, but unsure, nothing is wrong, you're not behind, you've moved past the obvious fixes and into the slower process that compounds over time. You're just in between signals.